The Sciforror Film Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another extra episode of the Sciforror Film Podcast. I'm Andy Walker and I am joined in this episode by filmmaker Frank Merle. Hello Frank, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. It's really good to have you. Now, you are a screenwriter, director and producer.
Yes.
Which of those would you say you prefer doing?
I am a director first, but it's the hardest of the three for me to find work for. And so I've directed 3 feature films. I'm in prep for my 4th feature film as a director, but I've written maybe 20 screenplays and I've produced about 30 films.
Okay, cool. Now I'm going to go into the question I normally ask everybody when they come on the show, which is, how did you get involved in filmmaking, and more specifically, how did you end up making horror films and that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll answer that second part first, which is that I truly love horror. I have since I was a very, maybe too young to be watching horror films.
Yeah.
I was a timid kid.
Right.
I was an only child. I didn't in grade school, didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't make friends easily, and I wasn't good at sports, but I made one good friend. And so I'm about age 11. I had one good friend, Bobby Morrissey. I would go over to his house after school, and he had an older brother in high school, right? And his older brother was the horror fan, and he was collecting VHS tapes. The older brother would go to Blockbuster Video and pick up the latest horror film, Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street, what else? Friday the 13th, right? And so so Bobby and I would sneak down to the den and watch these movies with his older brother and his friends.
Right.
And it made me less timid, right? Being able to get through these horror films and not be scared, right?
Yeah.
Made me feel like a big kid, and it felt really cool to hang with these older boys, right? So that was that's what I also have another fond memory for me of that age is I was somewhat dyslexic a little bit. I had a hard time with my right and left hand. I was always mixing up right and left. If they said to turn right, I didn't know which way that was. But when I watched the original Nightmare on Elm Street, I started thinking about Freddy Krueger. For some reason, I just instinctively knew which hand had the glove. And I would, and it was one of the, like I said, trying to be brave and not be timid. I would imagine myself as Freddy, not doing any of the terrible stuff he did, just with this glove on his hand.
Yeah.
It cured my left and right problem, because every time I had to, figure out which shoe was my left shoe, I'd go, well, no, Freddy's glove is on the right hand. And that to this day, I think that instinctively. So I have Freddie to thank for helping me put on the right shoe in the morning.
Okay.
And so then about getting into filmmaking, it's not so, I always loved movies, but it's not something my parent, no one in my family, no one I knew was a filmmaker. I grew up in Chicago, very far away from Hollywood. And to me, movies were made by very special, very magical people. I didn't know how they were made, It just seemed like a very far away world. But I always liked storytelling. I always liked entertaining. And
Right.
so when I got a little older into high school, I started doing magic and doing, magic shows for, birthday parties and that kind of thing. That was one of my creative outlets. And did a lot of writing. So if you had asked me at age 15 what I wanted to do with my life, I would say writing, something involved with writing. Maybe I would be a journalist. Maybe I'd be a great novelist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but I just what I loved about writing was being able to fully immerse yourself in someone else's life, and the it seemed unlimited. The possibilities were unlimited. So I liked that aspect. And from there, I got into theater. So I started doing theater in high school. And I would be in the plays, but I was more interested in what the director was doing, the behind the scenes. And so that sort of got me interested in putting on plays.
Right.
And so then I started screenwriting, and I found I was quite a natural at it. I very much enjoyed screenwriting. And so I went to college at the Goodman School of Theater in Chicago, which was a very serious conservatory for actors and directors, and Chicago is a very good theater town. And so I was able to, and I always had sort of a producer's mentality to me where I was never going to be the one to sit back and wait for a job, right? So the thing I didn't like about acting was the audition process
Yeah.
of putting yourself out there with hundreds of other people and hoping somebody likes you. What I wanted was to be the person to say, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
going to bring this art into the world. Here's my vision. Join me on this vision, right? And so that's sort of what led me into producing. So myself and several other students who were my friends at the time in college, we started a theater company. And so when I graduated, I stayed in Chicago for a few years as the artistic director of a small theater company, but we did everything from Shakespeare to Ibsen and Chekhov, all the way to new works. And I enjoyed that, and that was my life for a while. While I was doing that, I just started making short films for fun, really just in my free time, really just as a hobby. I never thought it would end up being in my career, but
Right.
it was, I've just always wanted to entertain as much as possible. And, something about theater that started to get sort of, it started to get me down. It started to sadden me was you would put all this work into a play and it would run for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that, and then it would be over. The show would close. No matter how, we had a small little, maybe like a 200-seat theater. So the most we could hope for was a couple thousand people would see our play, and then it wouldn't exist. And you could videotape the play, but that's not the same. It really isn't. And you would put, let's say you could put the same amount of work, the same amount of energy, the same amount of money into a movie, it exists forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was the element that started to make me think more about film. And like I said, I was just doing short films for fun, and I would try to just as an artist, I would challenge myself to be more sophisticated with each one until I would put them on YouTube and I could get instant feedback, right? And so it
Yeah.
was something because, I would make a short film, put it on YouTube, and within a few days, I would have the same number of people had seen it as one of my plays I had put on that I had spent weeks creating, right?
Yeah.
So that was very appealing to me. So then I just started writing screenplays, so I was always self-taught. I never went to film school. I learned everything I needed to know about lenses and lighting and proper screenplay formatting from books. I was,
Right.
I was always somebody who wasn't afraid to go into the library, grab a book off the shelf and learn something new. And then the other element of it that gave me the confidence I think I needed to make movies was this was in the era of DVDs and director commentary tracks.
Right.
So I could watch a movie, and if I enjoyed that movie, I could just watch it again and listen to the director talk about the movie. And
Yeah.
that was really a huge education for me. And it broke down that feeling that I had about movies being made by very magical people off in La La Land, because they were just regular people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could hear their voice coming through this DVD commentary track, and the things they would talk about was like, oh, I could relate to those things. That's something I think I'd like to do. I'd really like to try that. So that was that, so for me, I just became as sophisticated as I could. Those short films I was making, like I said, until I got better and better until they were darn right cinematic. And then I started entering film festivals, and that's when I discovered that there was a community, because I didn't know anybody who made
Yeah.
films until I went to a few film festivals and met people like me that were also making films. And
Yeah.
that's when I realized, oh, it's not just Hollywood. Hollywood is, yeah, there are fancy people making movies in Hollywood. I'll never be one of those people, but there's this independent film community.
Absolutely.
And what's beautiful about independent film is there are people like me who are not waiting for permission, not waiting for something, like this, like going back to this thing I didn't like about auditioning, right? It was like independent film, you can figure it out. You can figure it out. Nobody's going to stop you from making a movie.
The thing I think about, I find with independent film, and I've heard some other people say this, is the fact that it's like, if you don't know what the rules are, you don't know that you can't break them.
That's right.
So you just do things because it's what you want to do. And people go, "Oh, you can't do that." Well, I just did it.
Yes.
Why can't I do it? But no, that's cool. That's very good. I got to ask. I mean, I've talked to some people who are actors who have acted in stage and in film, and they highlighted the difference between doing the two. Do you think there's a real difference between directing for stage and directing for film?
Yes.
And do you think either one of them is either better or easier?
It's very different, surprisingly different, because the end result, you're putting on a 2 hour play or you're putting on a 2 hour movie. I would think there was more crossover than there is actually. But the way you put on a play is bit by bit, right? So that the end result, at the end, okay, 6 weeks from now, these 12 people are going to have to go out on that stage for 2 hours and say all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where are we going to start? One little bit at a time. Let's rehearse this scene. Now we're going to rehearse this scene. We put those two scenes together. Now we rehearse a third scene. Now we put three scenes together, and you build it. You build it over those 6 weeks until you have this thing.
Yeah.
And film is very different. You're never going to see the whole thing. You're never going to see more than a tiny little bit on any one day. You never see it when you're on set. I'm talking about on set with your actors, with your crew. Every day on set, it's like, this is the page we're doing today.
Yeah.
And you'll spend, it's funny, a lot of people who, their first time they come on set, somebody will want to visit set and see what it's like making a movie. People who, they're always surprised how boring it is. If you're the outsider, if you're stepping onto the set, if you're not part of the team that's making it, it's like, it feels like everybody's just sitting around, because everybody's doing, because on film, everybody is hyper focused on this next moment, this one moment we're trying to create right now. So it's the lighting, it's and the actors are just sitting there waiting, for their part. To go in there and then maybe you've got 3 or 4 lines of dialogue and you're going to do it over and over and over until it's perfect, and that and then okay, we're moving on, and now we're going to set up the next one. And so you get these tiny little pieces that never add up to anything until you're in post-production, right? And so then that feeling of seeing it come together is this is one of the things that's so very different about between theater and film, is that as it's all coming together in theater, we're all feeling it together. The whole cast and crew is like, oh, we're moving towards opening night. Film, the crew only worked on these little pieces, every day. And so when you get to post-production, it's a whole new team. Now you've got your editor and you've got, special effects, sound. It's a whole new team that are taking those pieces you built and assembling a movie. And so there's never that same, you never get that sense. And so is one better than the other? No, they're just, from my perspective, they're just different.
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing is that a lot of people are often surprised that you don't make a film in the order that it's seen on the screen.
Oh, yes, right.
So
So
you kind of you could start off filming the very last scene of the film and then work backwards from there, or work sort of like in another piece in the middle of the film and then work on other bits.
yes, people are often interested in like why, because I hear that a lot, and a lot of filmmakers, especially filmmakers that come from theater, they want to do it in order, and
Yeah,
then they're told by the team, no, no, that's not really how movies are made. There are so many complicated factors that go into the schedule, right?
yeah,
And so for a film schedule, you have to take in the everybody's availability and locations
yeah,
and the complexity of certain scenes versus others, right? So you have to factor in if we're doing an external scene, what if it's going to rain that day? We need a backup plan, right? And so
yeah,
you don't want to save your external scenes for the end of the shoot because you won't have a backup plan, right? So that's one factor and of why movies get shot out of order. And
yeah,
then when you're on this one particular location, you're going to have to shoot all the scenes that take place in that location, right, before you move on to the next location. So yes,
yeah.
it's just very technical, and that's it's a part of the job for actors is to know what part of the story they're in on any
Absolutely.
given day.
Yeah, it is difficult sometimes. I've made a couple of short films and I've been in some films and that, and it's like it's difficult sometimes to remember exactly where you are because of the fact you're filming out of sequence. So it's you need to have somebody there who can remind you exactly what's going on.
Yep.
Um, do you find it? I mean, with the writing as far as it goes for stage and screen, do you find them immensely different or?
Less so. So for me, when I was writing when I was writing for theater, a lot of the criticism I would get from my plays was that and when I say criticism, I mean, we would put on a play, it would, the Chicago reviewers would come and review it,
Yeah,
and they would say, Frank Merle is really writing screenplays. I would get that a lot. I would get that a lot. He's staging a movie. And I
yeah,
didn't know what that meant at the time because, you can I mean, some plays, yes, it's 2 hours set in one room in real time. Yes, that's one style of play, but not
yeah,
all plays, right? A lot of plays, you can, this scene is on an airplane and you just bring in two seats and a sound effect and you understand you're on an airplane
yeah,
for that scene. You use your imagination in theater, so you can go anywhere and do anything in theater. You can slay a dragon, on the stage,
yeah,
probably easier than you can on film, right?
yeah.
But um, you know, yeah, I think what was the question? Was one easier or
Well, no, with the writing, how different was it for writing
how
for play
different?
and film?
Yes, and so I think what I think those critics were saying when they said I was writing m movies was that I was trying to be as entertaining as hell.
Yeah, right.
And I really just I was always I always wanted to make people laugh and cry, whatever genre it was. And so I would have action scenes in my plays.
Yeah,
Um, and I wasn't necessarily so worried about, my goal was never to fix the world. My goal was to let you escape for a couple hours, which isn't
yeah,
to say I didn't have, some interesting themes or I didn't, want to say something. Of course, I want to, everything I do, I want to be a reflection of the world, but that was never front and center. For me, it's always the story, the journey of the characters should be front and center.
right.
And if we learn a little bit about ourselves along the way, that should come from the truthfulness of the story rather than a message that's there. And I think that might be a distinction,
Yeah,
between the high art of theater and movies,
Yeah.
and that goes back to like why horror, is that I've never looked down on horror as a secondary, as less
Yeah.
important as other genres, and so I'm not, so I've never been that. People say, oh, you came from theater. Oh, people assume, oh, maybe I want to make films with the capital F, or
Yeah.
like I said, high art films. But no, I want to make movies. I want to sell popcorn. I want people to have a good time, and horror lends itself to that. Where if they say, well, I'm making a horror film or I'm making a thriller, you understand that the number one thing is going to be I'm going to be entertained by this, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I get that. So, I mean, you started off, as you say, started off making short films. Your first three short films, you then put out all in one together as a kind of compilation of those.
Yes, when the first three that were horror,
Yeah.
right? And so when I started making shorts, the first few were comedy.
Uh,
And because comedy is what, especially in the early days of YouTube, that's what YouTube was for.
yeah.
Now YouTube is, for everything. Uh, but in the early days of YouTube, it really felt like little comedy bits, right? And so I was making comedies, but I found that my first few short films weren't necessarily fun. They were learning experiences. And what I mean is the making, the process of it. The end result was funny.
Yeah.
But when I was on these first few films, because I was out of my element, because I was learning, you would do a take, the actors would say their lines, and then I'd say cut. And I would say, was that funny? Was it funny enough? Let's watch it back. How can we make it funnier? And conversely, that doesn't really work. It's hard to sit around and mull something over and go, okay, let's do it again funnier.
Yeah.
And usually it ended up being the first take was the right one anyway, because you start overthinking it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, just as an experiment, again, I've always loved horror. As an experiment, maybe I want to say by my fifth or sixth go at it, I said, okay, I'm going to make it. So I wrote a horror short, and the concept was just, okay, this is going to be a zombie apocalypse, but we're not going to see any zombies. We're just going to be trapped in a closet with, a bunch of people, and we're going to find out that the zombie apocalypse is going on out there. So it
Right.
would be very, it would lend itself to my strengths, which was good acting and good dialogue.
Yeah.
And my first horror short, I was amazed with myself at how much more fun I was having as a director, because it would be the opposite, where it's like I would say action and everybody's screaming and they're mad at each other, and they got rubber knives they're threatening to kill each other with. And then I would say cut, and everybody would laugh.
Yeah.
Everybody would laugh, and we would feel like we did it. The energy was there. I wouldn't need playback. I would know I had a good take. And so it was so funny. It was the reverse of what I was used to with comedy, where, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we would be so worried about whether it was funny or enough. And so I naturally said, oh, I like this, right? And so then I started making horror shorts, and I put together. And so this was around the time 2009 is when I moved to Los Angeles from Chicago in order to really immerse myself full time in the film community. And that's when I took these three horror shorts that I was most proud of, and yeah, and they added up to about feature length. You can say we're about, they were 25 minutes each. And so I put that together as a anthology. It's a horror
Yeah.
anthology. Yeah, and so that was my first foray into feature filmmaking, you could sort of say. Or
Uh,
it was certainly my first. It was my first time monetizing, right? Because you can't really. Well, now you can. Now on YouTube, you can make money with shorts.
yeah.
Back when I was doing it, that wasn't really a
No, no,
thing.
I know. Yeah.
It was free back then, and so when I put my three shorts together, it was so that I could package it. I made a DVD. I sold those on Amazon, and that was the first time I was monetizing and seeing the fruits of my labor.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. You also made a couple of podcast series and TV series episodes. One for I Nudes and one for the Gloom, or some for the Gloom.
Yes,
What?
yes. So the Gloom was a pandemic project. It was something that came out of 2020.
Yeah.
It was going to be a movie. And it was excellent. I had Tobin Bell from Saw, great actor, attached. And it's a movie very much like Friday the 13th. Not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street 3,
All right.
set in the hospital. And so it was people who were, we're following these teenagers who are having nightmares and terrible things happening to them. There's a bad doctor played by Tobin. And then 2020 happened, everything got locked down, and there were a lot of creative people who were trying to still be creative, right?
Yeah.
And it was very hard to be home alone during that time. And so my producing partner and I quickly pivoted. We're not going to sit around and wait to be told we can go back to work.
Yeah.
Let's make a podcast. And so what we did is we rewrote that film into I think it's an 8-part beginning, middle, end. So it's a narrative fiction, like an old radio drama. And I grew up listening to some of those old radio dramas, and so I really understood what this is.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. So you're just going to use voice, and you're going to use sound effects to tell the whole story. And this particular script lent itself well to that. And Tobin Bell, was happy to do it, and the other actors. And so everybody, it was entirely that. So that project was done entirely in isolation. So in other words, everybody filmed their own part in their own home.
Wow.
And I directed each actor individually.
Wow.
And so it was in some ways, an artificial process, but it was a great process for me because I got to have that extra time with each actor. And, like I said, I didn't, the thing, I used to do a little acting in high school. I've never really acted since. But this really scratched my acting bug, because the way I would record these, we would just be, we weren't doing it as a group. It would just be me and one actor recording that actor's entire part, and I would play all the other parts.
Right.
Okay, so I played, so it was a really fun, because I was able to then, as an actor, sort of immerse myself in every role. So I understood every role. I understood the quirks of each role. And I did what I could to imitate, each actor, how I knew they would present their part. So we recorded each actor in isolation, and then post-production was putting it all together. And it was quite a process, interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of it. And so I recommend, a little shameless plug, check out The Gloom wherever you get your podcasts. It's an 8-part series that all adds up to what I think is a pretty cool, scary story that would have made a good movie, but ended up making a very, very good podcast.
Cool. That sounds good. Sounds very interesting. I've noticed something. I mean, you've done a couple of ones where you've had one section in an anthology, that sort of thing. But you've kind of varied the films that you've made. You've done like comedy horror. You've done a drama, sort of mystery horror. You've done fantasy thrillers. Do you like to just keep changing things and making everything a bit different every time?
I would think yes, I think that is true. But I love all genres. In terms of tone, I like to challenge myself. I like doing new things. And I'm also still always, I have yet to make my Citizen Kane, or even, dare I say, my Friday the 13th. And so I'm going to keep tinkering until I get it right. And so, I with every movie I did, maybe I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I'm never quite happy with what I do. And at the same time, because I'm working in an independent world with lower budgets, you're always sort of compromising. So nobody's writing me $100 million check to make, everything that's in my mind come to life. I'm not trying to make excuses for my movies, but what I'm saying is there's always limitations, especially in time. Hollywood, they'll shoot a movie for 6 months. I get 6 weeks would be a lot for me. I'm making my movies typically in 3 or 4 weeks, very quickly. And so, I While to answer your question, I could say, oh yes, I want to experiment with every genre, but you know what? If one of my movies really does hit, I'll make 10 of those. Because what I want to do is entertain people.
Yeah,
What's most important to me.
yeah, no, I get that, I get that. Now, as far as upcoming films or future films, I know two you've got a crime thriller, which I don't know the title of,
Yep. Criminality.
Criminality, and
Yes.
you also got a horror film called The Knacker.
Yes.
So are they the only two projects you've got upcoming, or are there others?
So those are two in development, and I'm very excited about those. The Knackerman in particular being one that has uh, that this is a script that I've been working on probably most of my adult life.
Okay.
It's changed along the way, and it's a horror film that combines all the genres that I love, Saw and Scream and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and puts a modern twist on it. And so this is a movie. This is going to be my love letter to horror fans. And that one is I'm very happy to say coming along really well. And I have some very fascinating cast attachments that I'm not allowed to talk about yet,
Okay.
but I'm very, very excited about that one. I'm also working on a film called Neon 33, which is a tech thriller.
Oh,
And that one is probably going to be the next thing I film within the next couple months here. And again, I'm sure you hear this a lot where people will say, I can't really talk about my new projects.
yeah,
And that is because there's, behind the scenes, there's contracts happening and that kind of stuff. And so that's the reason us filmmakers tend to be a little cloak and dagger about what's coming next,
yeah,
because then you carefully try to present, the forward-facing PR of the movie the way you want to, for better or worse. And so, but this tech thriller, let's see, what can I tease out to you about it? It's primarily set in a self-driving car. And that's
oh,
what's so
okay,
unique about this movie. There's others movies that have done this and are going to do this as those as self-driving cars become more
yeah,
commonplace. But it's a movie that is it really speaks to our modern isolation as people, and how there's more and more technology in our lives.
yeah.
It's separating us more and more. And so I wrote this this is my first, actually, Neon 33 is my first time working with another screenwriter.
Oh, okay,
And that's been a great process. So he wrote the first draft, and it was initially just a agoraphobic person, and was all set in his house. And the plot, um, the story unfolded through FaceTime and Zoom calls and all that. And I really liked it, but I had done my version of that movie. The employer is five people trapped in a room,
right,
and I wasn't interested in another movie that's just that static visually. But I thought, and then I sort of came up with this: what if we transpose that story to he's on his way from A to B, and we tell the story in real time. So he's on a 90-minute cab ride,
right,
but he's still going to be interacting with the screens the whole time. So we just transpose the story that way. And then, because it's a very tech heavy story, and you're dealing with all the screens, it also deals with AI, because there's a character that we're not sure if the character is real or not. So
right,
then I added in this extra element of, well, what if, instead of a normal taxi cab, what if it's self-driving? And then what if that car also has an AI voice, an
yeah,
AI assistant? And so then that became a new character. The car itself became a character in the movie. And so,
yeah.
yeah, and that's the one I'm working on now, and we're in casting for that now, and it's very, very exciting. But I think that one should be out next year.
Cool. That sounds really cool. Actually, I'm quite interested by that. I'm looking forward to that. Um, so the films you've made and all that sort of thing so far, are any of them available streaming wise, or are the ones you said that the first one you brought out on DVD, is that still available to buy anywhere?
Yes, I think that I'm not sure about that anthology set, but every movie I've done since, and I'm very proud of this, that they are widely available. And so one thing, they should mostly, because I know your podcast is worldwide. So I know that most of them are available in the UK, for example,
Okay.
and Europe, but they're all available in the US. Uh, Amazon Prime Video, is a very good one, and I
Yeah.
suggest to people you can just go on Prime and look up my name. So if you just look up my name, then all of my films that are available will pop up.
Okay.
And so Prime Video, and then the other common one is Tubi. So
Yeah.
Tubi for free movies, and so as a distinction for anyone who doesn't know, Tubi is free ad supported movies, and so you can watch the movie for free, but filmmakers still get paid
Yeah. Yeah.
from the ads, versus most of my movies that are on Prime and other paid platforms where it's like $3-4, to rent a movie, 10 to buy it. Obviously, the filmmaker gets paid that way. So either way, you can make the choice. If you want to invest a little money, filmmakers really appreciate it. It really matters, especially for
Yeah.
independents.
Absolutely.
But I mean, go ahead. People will, please don't pirate these films.
No. No.
And because that either that few dollars or the little bit of time you invest watching the ads, it makes all the difference into whether or not independent filmmakers can keep making films.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. I agree completely. Um, so, just a final sort of
Sure.
slightly silly question, if you like. But you've made a lot of different styles of horror films and that sort of thing, and some sci-fi stuff and thrillers and that sort of thing. Is there any particular genre of film or subgenre of film that you haven't made that you really want to do?
I think, well, that's the the I remember when I was doing theater, and like I said, we did everything from Shakespeare to new scripts. And the crowning piece of my journey, I spent all of my 20s producing and directing theater. And I got to direct Hamlet. Okay,
Right.
so I directed a production of Hamlet that was fan frickin' tastic. I'm not one to toot my own horn often, but everything, I had all my career up to that point, all the pieces fell into place with perfect casting, perfect staging. There's an opera company in Chicago, Lyric Opera. They had a once every 10-year costume sale that happened to be timed right when I was doing my production.
Right.
And me and my cast and my crew, we went to this sale at the Lyric Opera and got these gorgeous costumes. I mean, for cheap. They're like, very fancy robes and garments and, oh my God, crowns. And so we put on what looked like a very expensive production of Hamlet, and a traditional production. This wasn't set on a subway. This was, a
Yeah. Yeah.
traditional Renaissance Hamlet. And all of my actors were classically trained, and so the language sounded beautiful. And I did only the briefest of cuttings of the script, so it was a fairly long production. And man, I sat there, I watched every darn performance of that, and I just bathed in the glory of it's never going to get any better for me. And that was probably the beginning of the end for me as a theater director,
Uh,
because I had achieved the perfect show. And I'm like, I wasn't interested in trying to chase that again. So, but with film, I haven't made the perfect film yet. And so for me, it's not about the genre. For me, it's about getting better with each one. And
right.
if I ever do end up making the perfect film, I'll retire. you know, um, but I probably won't, because, like I said, I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. I like that. That's a good answer. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's been great talking to you.
My pleasure.
Everybody out there, I will do as I always do. I will post links to Frank's social media and also his IMDb page. Have a look out for his films, whether they're streaming online or whether they're maybe available anywhere else. I'm assuming that the newer films may be doing festival runs and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so my current movie Namaka just finished up its festival run. We won 16 awards with that one.
Cool.
It has Jamie Kennedy from Scream is in that movie, and also David Howard Thornton from Terrifier, Art the Clown. But it's not a horror film. It is a dark fantasy film. And
Yeah.
so I know this is but this is a sci-fi horror podcast, and there's definitely sci-fi elements to this movie.
Right.
And it's set in a tropical, lush environment. It's very interesting. I love this movie a lot, and it is. Uh, I just did delivery of the final version for my UK distributor, so it will be coming very soon in the UK, but it's currently available in the United States. And the website is namakamovie.com. You can probably post that link. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, watch out for Namaka and watch out for Frank's other films, whether streaming or coming up at festivals and that sort of thing. And hopefully we'll see more of you in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody for watching, and I'll be back again soon. Bye.
The Sciforror Film Podcast.